The Pat Kenny Show.
With MasterCard. Share in extraordinary experiences all over the world with priceless cities at priceless.com.
This is Newstalk.
We're coming to you from the Guildhall in Derry this morning, and we want to go back in time on the 30th of January 1972 in the Bogside area of Derry, which is only, from where I'm sitting now, about 500 yards away. 14 civilians who were at a civil rights march were shot and killed by British soldiers. Now, to this day, nobody has been prosecuted for the murders of those victims, but this Thursday we're expecting the decision from the Public Prosecution Service about whether the soldiers who shot the civilians will be prosecuted or not. I'm joined now by John Kelly, whose brother Michael Kelly was one of the Bloody Sunday victims. John, good morning and welcome.
Good morning.
We're going back a long way. What is it, 47 years? So you were a young fella then, and your brother Michael was younger.
Yeah, I was 23 at the time. Michael was my younger brother, who was only 17 years old.
Now, set the context of the march that day, because there had been marches before in Derry.
Yeah, there were plenty of marches, but this one was important and very particular in such a way that it was an anti-internment march. At that time, since August 1971, there was hundreds of people interned at the time. So the Derry Civil Rights Association decided to hold a protest march, a peaceful march, and we left the Cregan in the Hill, and that was the last time I seen Michael alive.
Just to put that in context, the internment march, I mean, people who are too young to know, it was literally arrest without trial. You could be picked up and literally put behind bars for the duration without any recourse.
That's correct, and that was the importance of the march. They protested that, the fact that hundreds of people, nationalists, were in prison at the time without charge or any or crime. And the Derry Civil Rights Association decided to hold this march as a protest, peaceful protest. So we gathered in the Cregan up in the hill, and I spoke to Michael prior to the march, very first march. He was never on a march before. 17-year-old boy. The only reason why he went was because his friends were going. And after speaking to him and advising him to be careful,
because there would be a certain amount of action, shall we say, at these marches. There might be, the confrontations with the security forces. There might be...
Yeah, at all time, not all the time, especially in relation to civil rights marches. There wasn't really at that time. But the fact of the matter was that it was his very first march. Yeah, he didn't know the score. He didn't know what it was about. So I left him, and we left the Cregan in the Hill, and we marched, and between 15 to 20,000 people eventually ended up marching that day. And the next time I seen Michael, I was standing outside a house, watching people giving first aid to a victim, Jerry McKinney, who had been shot. And I got a call from behind me, and it was my brother-in-law who was with Michael. He called me and told me Michael had been shot. So I helped to carry Michael. I put him in the ambulance and took him to the hospital, where he was declared dead on arrival. I remember every second of that day. It's ingrained in my memory.
Etched on your...
Never leave me, never leave me. And that's the importance of what we're trying to achieve. The fact is that 14 people, innocent people, were murdered that day.
People will say, it's a long time, time heals. What do you say to people who think, maybe, if not forgive, try to forget?
We can't forget, because an injustice happened that day, and it's still an injustice to this very day, that the perpetrators of Bloody Sunday were never ever brought to book for it, were never prosecuted for what they did. This soldier who murdered my brother, and we know who it was a soldier F. Now, I'm calling him F because we're all granted anonymity since 1972. Mm-hmm. F murdered Michael. How do we know that? The bullet embedded in Michael's spine. Afterwards, they found the bullet and traced it back to Soldier F's rifle. But this one soldier was responsible for 4 deaths that day, and injured at least another 4. So in less than 15 minutes, he actually shot 8 people. And 6 of those who died that day were just 17-year-olds.
Now, going back, there was an original inquiry, the Widgery inquiry at the beginning, and that exonerated the soldiers. In fact, it did not exonerate the marchers.
Certainly not. The blame was laid with the marchers. Widgery was a complete and utter whitewash. It was a cover-up. And even Father Daly, who became Bishop of Derry, and later on, his quote was, he found the guilty innocent and the innocent guilty. In other words, he protected the killers and laid the blame on Michael and all those who died and were injured that day.
The fight to get the Widgery inquiry result overturned, it was a long fight.
It was a long one. As I say, we formed a campaign in 1992, 20 years after Bloody Sunday. And after 6 years of hard campaigning, Tony Blair set up a second inquiry. And 12 and a half years later, Lord Savile produced a report that vindicated all our loved ones. So it took 38 and a half years to clear our loved ones' names.
And David Cameron himself, who was the PM at the time, reiterated the findings of Savile and exonerated completely those who were involved in the march.
Not only exonerated, he said it was unjustified, unjustifiable, it was wrong, and he actually apologised on behalf of the British nation and the British government. But as it stands at the moment, even with that apology, the apology will be meaningless unless we see justice for Michael and all those who died that day.
Where did the Savile inquiry leave that process? I mean, did it then hand it over to the Crown Prosecution Service and say, over to you, if the evidence is there, you can prosecute?
Well, actually what happened then was the Public Prosecution Services studied the report, and after a year and a half of studying the report, they then advised the police to set up a murder investigation. Now remember, the police never investigated Bloody Sunday, never did. So they spent 4 years reinvestigating the evidence and so on, and then they passed it back to the PPS. And now in turn, they have looked at the evidence from the murder investigation carried out by the PSNI, and now come this Thursday, we will know if there are going to be prosecutions or not.
There are some who don't want to pursue the soldiers. Many of them are in their 60s and 70s now and have gone on to live other lives, probably have become different people. And then there are those like yourself, John, who want to see justice done. It looks like no matter what happens on Thursday, there are some people who are going to be disappointed by the decision, whichever way it goes.
Well, we don't know. We just don't know. You're right, there's a few family members who just want to move on and, move on in their lives. But at the same time, in relation to my family and many other families, we want to see justice be done. The view is quite simply this. There's no age limit. There's no time on murder. There's no sell-by date on murder. And our people were murdered that day, totally innocent. These people got away with murder. I remember when Soldier F was given evidence at the Savile inquiry. And he gave evidence over a 2-day period of time.
And that happened in this building?
No, that happened. We had to travel to Central Hall in London for 13 months to hear the evidence of these soldiers because we feared for their lives coming back.
So they didn't come here?
They didn't come here. We had to go to them.
Yeah. And much of what happened, though, happened here.
Oh, yeah. As I say, 7 years at last of evidence taken. 13 months of it was spent in London. But whilst Soldier F was given his evidence, he showed absolutely no remorse. No remorse whatsoever.
Would that have made a difference if he said, I was young, the blood was running hot, we felt, in some way we were being threatened, Would that have made a difference?
But it wasn't just him. All the shooters were exactly the same. They showed absolutely, not one of them showed any remorse whatsoever for what they did. The
idea being we were only obeying orders kind of thing.
That being the case, they possibly people would say they were obeying orders, but to me personally, I always maintain that every human being is born with a will of its own. They make decisions, thousands of decisions every day of the week. On that day, these soldiers made the decision to kill our people. As simple as that.
In theory, even if they had been ordered by a superior officer, they could have shot over the heads of the crowd.
Exactly right. And there was one soldier called 027 who gave evidence to the fact that when he arrived beside the soldiers who were doing the shooting, he lifted his weapon to join in. And after looking down the barrel of the weapon, he seen no justification. And he didn't fire. So he was one person, and probably many other soldiers who didn't fire that day. But these guys were trained killers, born killers, and they knew exactly what they were doing that day and knew exactly what to do.
What do you want if there is to be a prosecution? I mean, do you want life in prison for these guys, that they serve the rest of their days behind bars?
Yeah, because I want a conviction. I want every one of them convicted. There was a story last week in the Telegraph, and it said that 4 of these soldiers were going to be prosecuted. 4 soldiers would not be satisfactory to me. Any soldier who fired off a shot that day should be prosecuted for murder and attempted murder. And in relation to conviction, I want a conviction and I want jail time. Now, again, it's a situation when you commit murder, you spend life in jail. And that should fall on them too as well.
What do you say to those who argue, and I think Boris Johnson was one of those who said, there's no Good Friday Agreement for the military. There are people on the nationalist side who committed terrible things but got a free pass. But there's no such thing for the military. What do you say to that argument?
Well, I can't argue for the IRA or for loyalism or anything whatsoever. But the fact of the matter is, thousands of Republicans and loyalists went to jail over the years of the conflict for the actions that they took during the conflict. And all the years of the conflict, only 4 British soldiers were ever prosecuted for crimes. They were released early from jail, and some of them were actually allowed back into their own regiment and promoted. So that's the type of people we're dealing with, and that's the type of military we're dealing with too as well.
So you want to see due process all the way, conviction and jail.
Exactly. That's what I want. And by the way, this is not about revenge. This is not about revenge. This is about justice. Justice for Michael.
2 other points. The commanding officers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if it would turn out in a trial that they say we were only obeying orders, what then?
Well, if that's the case, the commanding officers come into the frame, come into the equation, so therefore they should be prosecuted.
What's your own belief? Do you think these were people who just started to loose off rounds at the crowd, or do you think they were told to?
Well, it was premeditated as far as I'm concerned. We do know that in the evidence of 027, he said that the night before Bloody Sunday, Lieutenant came in to brief his men and said, let's teach these buggers a lesson tomorrow. We want some kills. And we believe it just didn't stop at the officer. We believe it went right to the very top. And I'm talking about the Prime Minister of the day, which was Ted Heath. He sanctioned it. He let it go. He let the dogs out.
But he's no longer with us.
He's no longer with us. And he gave evidence. And when he gave evidence, we were squirming and listening to him when Ted Heath was giving evidence.
Finally, the remarks of Karen Bradley.
Oh. Yeah. I was totally outrageous. I remember it was last week, and I was very, very, very angry at the fact that the statement that she came out with, the fact that she's supposed to represent all people in the North. What I seen her doing is taking a side, the side of the military. For her to turn around and say it was dignified and appropriate to murder my brother as he was standing as an innocent young boy, that was scandalous. And I called for her resignation, and she still should go, because she has totally lost the trust of the national people. Do you think she's
politically naive? I mean, this is a woman who didn't believe that, she thought that nationalists would vote for unionists and vice versa if the policies were appropriate.
Well, put it this way, she's a wrong woman in the wrong place. It's as simple as that, and she shouldn't even be here. But let's be honest, she's an educated woman. She should have been well briefed on what she was going to say, and I do believe that she was briefed, because what she done that day, she read off a piece of paper, and that was all premeditated.
There are 2 possibilities. There will be some prosecutions announced on Thursday, or perhaps none.
Yeah.
In the former case, where there are some, if F is not in there, you'll be very annoyed, I presume.
I'll be devastated. I'll be totally devastated.
If there are to be no prosecutions, you'll be
totally devastated. But I can't see it any other way. We have 3 scenarios. We have all to be prosecuted, some to be prosecuted, or none to be prosecuted. And I see it quite simply that there will be prosecutions, and hopefully every one of them will be prosecuted.
John Kelly, who lost his brother Michael on Bloody Sunday, thank you very much for joining us on the programme today.